There's over 200 manuscripts surviving from his. The closest one we have is the 9th century. So again, 700 years from the 2nd century to the 9th when he wrote. Thucydides, Herodotus, both 400 BC, 10th century, 1400 years. There's a small fragment, 400 years, but most of his are 1400 years. Herodotus, 1st century, is the closest one we have 75, so minimum 400 years. So here's my point. You have some of the most famous ancient writers of history, and they write, and we have some of their manuscripts. The total of those together, and the total of those together are less than 300 manuscripts. And most of them date 400 years plus after it was written. How often do you hear people say you can't trust what these people wrote? You never do. You never hear someone say, you can't trust Tacitus, because the manuscripts we have of Tacitus are 700 years after he wrote it. Why would you trust something? The copying process obviously has left us without the original, so you cannot trust what they say. Here's my point. If we're going to make the New Testament live by some criteria that if we don't have the original, we cannot know what was said, then with the amount of evidence we have for the New Testament, and if we can't trust that, you can't trust any ancient literature. None. Because the New Testament is the best attested literature of the ancient world. I'll show you, I covered up some numbers here. And I already mentioned them. The New Testament is written between 45 to 48 would be the book of James. The book of Galatians is written about the end of the 40s. And 5,700 documents total. The oldest one we have, or the one that comes closest to the time of writing, is a fragment from the Gospel of John. It's called Papyrus 52, P52. And it's found in the John Rylands Library in England. That's where it is now. It wasn't found there. That's where it's stored. You can be surprised. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of manuscripts yet to be even cataloged. And people today are still spending their whole life in dungeons of libraries looking at manuscripts and finding more and more and more. You see the 5,700? That used to be about 5,000 10 years ago. They've found 700 more manuscripts in the last 10, 15 years in the New Testament. Because they're sitting in dungeons of libraries. They've been found, but no one has time to go through them. So the other people too, they're going to find more of the other people too. Nonetheless, you see here though the 2nd century, the 2nd and 3rd century, from 100 to 200 years, we have 48 manuscripts of the New Testament that date back within 100 years of its writing. Now all these manuscripts aren't 100% complete. It's not the entire New Testament. You understand, when they wrote on papyrus, it was put into a scroll. And so you would have each scroll, like the book of Romans would be in a scroll, and the book of 1 Corinthians would be in a scroll. They wouldn't have the entire New Testament in a scroll because it would be as long as this room, if not longer. So it wasn't until the 2nd and 3rd century when the Codex, which is a book, was invented, that you could put all the books of the New Testament into one book, and it'd be massive. Because it's all animal skins, written on both sides. And so that's what starts happening in the 2nd and 3rd century. So of the 5,700, approximately 50 of them go back as soon as the 2nd and 3rd century. And I say down in footnote, another 9 papyri have been discovered from the late 3rd or early 4th century, but they haven't been completely cataloged yet. So I didn't add that number in. The majority of our manuscripts are, of that 5,700, the majority of them are after the 9th century. Okay, so I want to be honest with you. There's probably 400 or 500 of them before the 9th century. The rest of those are after the 9th century, and the reason that is because they all come from the old Byzantine Empire. Because once Greek rule diminished in the world, it was just people in Greece who spoke Greek. So they're continuing to produce manuscripts. So that's why they all come from that one region. Does that make sense? So we talk about how many of the other ones have. The New Testament has several hundred that are very ancient, with the majority of them, which I would probably say more than 4,000 of them, are past the 9th century. So with that, the evidence, the amount is unbelievable. And for scholars today to say you can't trust them because we don't have the original, is if you want to choose that, then you can trust no ancient document whatsoever. None. Because the New Testament is the best attested one in the entire world. So that makes sense so far. You don't got to agree with me, so I want you to understand me. Any clarification questions?
So you said that some manuscripts in the New Testament were partial. What about the other ones above? Are they complete documents or are they partial?
Good question. Mike, don't know. Very good question. I would assume a mixture. Because when you have something that's 1,000 years old, it's been sitting, like the papyrus was sitting in sand in Egypt. All the papyrus we have, which are well over about 120 papyrus in the New Testament, were all found in Egypt. Because if you put a piece of paper in your backyard now, what's going to happen to it in 10 years? Completely gone. But you put it in the sand of Egypt where not a drop of water hits it for 1,000 years, it's preserved. So nonetheless, it's still decay. So I doubt all of those are full documents. Some probably are, some probably aren't. Okay, now here's what I want to do. I want to show you as brief as possible. Oh, let me draw something here for you, if I could, just to illustrate this. Hopefully this works. I'm a lousy drawer. Okay, I want you to think here for a moment. Here is the original. Can you see that at the bottom? Here's the original New Testament. We'll just include it all together. And then the first line is the 2nd century. After it was written, it started to be copied. So I'm going to be very simplistic here. It was starting to be copied in the 2nd century and passed around. And each one of those were copied. And so just imagine, how this propagates itself. This is the 3rd century. Okay, you with me? And you get the 4th century, it goes endless. I realize this is an incredible art. Now, to take this out 16 centuries, and you have this incredible thing where you have thousands of manuscripts that are copied here, here, and here. And maybe this particular one here used this one and this one over here and 2 in front of it, and they brought them together. You see, because of the 5,700 manuscripts, guess how many of them are exactly 100% the same? Actually, Danny said he read where there's 2. There's two.
Brand new development. They found a small piece of the book of John that they actually found out was identical to another piece of the book of John.
Okay, so it wasn't a complete one.
It wasn't a complete.
Okay.
It was a piece of the book of John that was identical. I mean, a big enough chunk to make a big deal out of it.
Okay.
But one of them is held at Yale University here in the States, and one of them is in Dublin, Ireland. And they are 200 years apart, but they're still identical.
Okay.
Which is kind of a big deal.
But for the most part, obviously, except for those 2, every one of these manuscripts has some minor changes from other ones. You see, because if you have a manuscript, this one here, and you copy to that one, and we're talking, let's say the whole book of Romans, 16 chapters, hundreds and hundreds of words, and every one of you copied in this room. Every one of you would make 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 or 20 mistakes, where you would write the wrong word down, or you'd spell the word wrong. You'd do something. So then we would have 80 manuscripts of Romans from all of you that have some minor differences. Then we distribute those. Then someone copied those. And they took the mistake you possibly made. But the one you copied and the one you copied were being copied by you. And you say, these 2 don't agree. I think he was right. So you choose where he was right. You see how this propagates? To where all of a sudden now you have generations down the road, you've got a lot of variance. A lot of variance. And if we just stop right there, we would say when we're up here in the 16th century, we would say, wow, maybe I can't trust this if there's that many, quote, mistakes in it. But what I want to show you is the process they do in textual criticism to get back. This is going to be very simplistic. It's actually very complex. It's a science. Textual criticism, don't think the word criticism is a bad word. Textual criticism is the idea of looking at ancient manuscripts and trying to look at multiple manuscripts of one document and ask, can we get back behind it to the ones they were copied from and the ones they were copied from? And because we have so many in the New Testament, we can do that. We can actually do genealogies and say, this one came from this one, this one came from this one, this one came from this one. And we can get right back to the oldest ones in the 2nd century.